to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
She's back.
Back again.
Oh, wow. Welcome back, Jess.
Thank you.
It's been 3 weeks
Great
without
to be back.
you
Yeah, it felt like a long time. I think the
has.
longest I've been away from you guys on a podcast. So
Yeah.
Back in
back.
gray.
we're all back. I know, back in our blacks and grays today. We're matching if you.
If you're watching.
Yeah.
It was unintentional, but we just, we kind of have an unconscious connection.
We do.
Yeah, it just happens. So usually we show up to record and somehow we're coordinated.
We have a theme.
Yeah.
We've got a theme going on. Yeah, it's good to be back.
Yes. Now, Alex shared a little bit why you were gone.
Yeah.
And maybe people would love to hear an update on what you're able to share.
Sure.
About it.
Long story short, over the past year, my son has been having some evaluations and lots of specialists and doctor's visits, and it was determined that he had a tethered spinal cord. And so he had surgery on his back and his spinal cord a couple weeks ago. And so the recovery process is kind of ambiguous up to, I guess, the child, how they heal. So he's doing better. He just went back to school after about 3 weeks. And so he's got little bit of a long road ahead of him of just like recovering and stuff, but he's doing good. So thanks for asking. And for those of us or those that have reached out to you about that.
Yeah.
It's really sweet of you. So.
All right. Well, that's good to hear.
Yes.
You know what else would be good to hear is a voicemail if we had one. Do we have any voicemails? I feel like we haven't had one in a while.
We have one, and here it is.
Okay.
Hey, Uncomfortable Podcast. Hobby Lobby plays instrumental versions of worship songs. When I was in college, I slipped in anarchist punk music in between the services at church when I was running sound. So I was wondering, if you were going to slip in a song as instrumental music at Hobby Lobby, what song would you put in? I'll hang up and listen. Thanks.
Yes, do hang up so you can listen.
That's cute.
Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby is fascinating. Beyond the music they play in there.
You just get lost in the different art projects you could do?
No, they doubled down. Their leadership has doubled down on some things in the name of Christianity that surprises me a lot. Like, because, like when the barcode was created, a lot of Christians thought it was the mark of the beast. That just happens. And specifically, I don't know, someone in leadership at Hobby Lobby believed that so much that they wouldn't allow it in their store. And that's why when you go buy stuff at Hobby Lobby, they don't scan anything. They make all their staff key everything in.
They type in like those 6, 7.
Yeah. Because of the mark of the beast.
I have no idea.
So, and they still won't adopt the barcode. So I don't know. I'd probably put in some song about barcodes, if there's one that exists.
Write your own?
Yes. It's like, barcodes are morally gray. It's okay to scan them all day. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what my song will be. I really don't know. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you have a song?
Are we like, this person sounded like they took a song that was a little contradictory and snuck it in instrumentally. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe like a nice rap song, like Little John.
Some Little John in there.
They're just all
but
beats.
An instrumental version of it.
Throw it up there. If we're picking like my favorite instrumental would be like, I don't know, the Lord of the Rings soundtrack. Throw that up there.
They'd probably like that too much. It's too
I know.
Christian
I'd be
adjacent.
too likable. They'd probably offer me a job.
Yeah, they'd be like, why haven't we been playing
You
this
look
all
like
along?
a good typer of 6.
Yeah, you know the 10 keys?
What is your
System
answer?
one?
I'm confused. Is it Little John or is it Lord of the Rings? Because I feel very
I'm going to do
different.
both.
I'll go right in the middle. It's Little John from Robin Hood.
Okay.
So,
He has a song. An album.
Robin
Little John
Hood
and
lives
we were
on
about there. We
forest.
almost nailed it.
We are
Yeah,
all
the Disney
on the same
one.
vibe
That's
today, guys. Okay, Alex,
Good.
bring us back.
I was just thinking very deeply about this in the last few moments as you guys were.
I wish that we had whiteboards that we could write down.
Yeah, and then reveal.
And I just think probably Who Lets the Dogs Out. I just think
I would not have guessed that
it would
one.
shock some people.
Can we leave the barks in there? It's all instrumental.
What would it be like?
Roof.
It would be interesting, like thought experiment as well, just to have a little bow, 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 and just like see if people start to just, loosen up a little bit.
I know.
The instrumental to...
Didn't Chick-fil-A do that for a long time too? Or do they still do that? Have the instrumental...
I don't know for sure.
Worship songs?
I don't know if it's always instrumental.
I feel like it was in the years ago, but maybe it's not now.
Definitely Shields has Christian music playing in the background.
Oh, really?
Worship music.
All Shields or just like Midwestern?
I think all, but
is it just a Midwestern store?
Definitely the one that I frequent does. So yeah, that's interesting.
Cool. If you live somewhere else in the country and you're by a Shields, just will you stop for us?
Yeah, let us know.
Walk through.
So if it could start maybe like an instrumental mashup of Who Let the Dogs Out, and then all of a sudden go, bow, 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 bow. And then I just want to see if people, and then the third mashup on there would be Hey Macarena.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You went with some classics.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Wow.
We're gonna have people dancing in the aisles at Hobby Lobby. I've never noticed the music there. It's been so unoffensive that I've just not even noticed it playing. Have you noticed it?
Have you? My mom, real quick. She was at I don't know what store, but they were playing a more soft version of Old Town Road.
Okay.
And so she liked it so much, she went home and YouTubed it. And she kept playing it over and over on YouTube because of a place like that. And she was like, wow, it's more upbeat in real life than where it was. But and I was like, Mom, Old Town Road. I just didn't see it.
Yeah. She Google those lyrics or?
And watching the music. She's like, the music video is like a short movie.
She know what lean is now?
I did not actually let her know anything like that.
Oh, okay.
Just let her have her fun.
Well, if you're watching this and you want to comment which song you would sneak in there, that might be fun. So let us know.
Yeah, and my answer, it's probably one of those questions. My answer would maybe change tomorrow if I thought about it more.
I'm surprised you didn't say Justin Timberlake, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Senorita was going to get up there, but I
was trying to think about songs that involve hobbies and crafts, but there's not a lot out there. So, yeah. Well, there we go. That's our answer. Up next, we're going to be discussing a topic that hasn't really been discussed on the podcast before, not directly anyways, and that is forgiveness and what that looks like in our lives, and especially in the lives of a Christian. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Forgiveness. Something that we are encouraged to participate in, and sometimes maybe we take the idea of it for granted and what it means. I know in the past year I've thought about the concept of it maybe more than I have in the past for a number of reasons, a number of personal reasons, but I don't know that we always take it serious. I think, Jess, even before we were recording, you were mentioning how sometimes as parents, you'll almost like force it on a kid to ask for forgiveness or tell someone that, to forgive another child. And maybe that's kind of the way where we learn it. And then that's what we think it is. There's just so much surrounding it. And I think there's always these fads that come and go throughout the years. And, it used to be forgive and forget. And now everyone's like, well, forgive, but you never forget. And then they act like that's an original thought, but we've heard it for probably 10 years now. And it's interesting because I think there's probably a little bit of truth to all of it. But when you break it down, what is forgiveness? And what does it mean to be a Christ follower and practice forgiveness? What does that look like? And that's what we hope to unpack a little bit today.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think interestingly, we have to have a metric or a measure or usually somewhere to figure that out. Like who do we turn to? Where do we turn for our advice on should you forgive? Should you not forgive? And recently an article not randomly, because I feel like she's probably the most talked about person in at least American culture right now. Over the last year is Taylor Swift. And so that's where we're turning right now. Some of culture is actually turning towards Taylor Swift for advice on forgiveness. Recently ABC had an article and it was titled, "You don't have to forgive and you don't have to forget to move on. What Taylor Swift teaches us about forgiveness. And interestingly, the article has a juxtaposition of Taylor Swift and the other, what they call most powerful woman in the world, Oprah Winfrey. And it's talking about the two different theories or ideas or ways that they would teach forgiveness. Obviously, Taylor Swift, talks in a lot of her songs and writes about some of the beefs that she's had, or, haters, whatever you want to call it. And, infamously says, shake it off. The hater's gonna hate, and you just got to shake it off. And so in her theory, through this article, is like this idea that Taylor endorses what we might call a cautious and conditional approach to forgiveness. And then the article says that Oprah, on the other hand, is leaning more actually into what they would say is the Christian worldview, which is unconditional forgiveness. And so it's just interesting that even in these spaces, this is just something everybody has to navigate. It's not just like a Christian idea or concept, though we'll talk more about why it is a crux point in the Christian faith and a lot of other religions. But it's just interesting. This is so part of humanity, because we're all going to be hurt and all going to be wronged and have opportunities to forgive, that we will look towards pop stars, towards almost anybody to find some advice on this. And so it'll be a fun conversation, interesting.
So let's define forgiveness. This is probably the Webster's dictionary definition: to cease to feel resentment against an offender, or pardon, forgive one's enemies, to give up resentment, to grant relief from payment of. Those are some very clinical, sterile descriptions of forgiveness.
And it was interesting when we were researching forgiveness. If you Google it, there's tons of different definitions and things like that. And I think just to remember that we're all in different places with forgiveness. And so the complexity and the various perspectives that we bring, maybe one definition isn't going to feel right, or it's not going to feel like that it fits. But I think just to be aware of that is that we're all kind of in different places as we're coming at this subject too, different levels of hurts that we've experienced and different things. And so I think just keeping that in mind as we're moving forward through this as well.
Well, forgiveness becomes a complicated thing when it's, am I forgiving an offense? Like, hey, someone came and pushed me, I'm forgiving them, versus like multiple offenses. Or it can even get more complicated because you don't realize until later, like, that somebody hurt you. I mean, a lot of times if you're older, you've gone through therapy and you're dealing with some trauma and you're looking back at your life, you might not realize like the offenses and the hurt. And sometimes there's been so much time between there, that person might not even realize that there's a need for you to want to forgive them, or that you would ask for it. And so it does become complex, and there becomes more nuance as time stacks and all that kind of stuff. There's some simple, things like, oh, you pushed me on the playground. It was an accident. I forgive you. But then it can become very detrimental to how our lives are shaped, and healing happens in people's lives as well. So,
we also seem to be in a moment with cancel culture and things like that, where people will demand an apology. And if someone says something that is offensive to them, then they need to apologize. And I think that's kind of a tricky thing to navigate as well, because people do it because they're told to do it. People do it to save face. People do it to save their reputation for a number of different reasons. But are the people that are asking for the forgiveness, were they actually hurt in the beginning? And I think sometimes it's kind of like people are playing a role in society because this is what we're told. We're supposed to be offended by everything, and we're supposed to be upset about everything. And so this person said this thing, and now I'm offended, and they need to apologize. And then they're going to probably give a disingenuous apology, but yet we don't really forgive them for that. They maybe they lose their careers, or whatever that is, And so I don't know. It's kind of an interesting dynamic there. But then also, like you were saying, Alex, I think it's sometimes people hurt you without doing it intentionally, and in a lot of ways that feels different than someone who intentionally sought out to hurt you. If that was their motives were to hurt you. And is it different? Is it different to forgive them versus someone who hurt you unintentionally? I don't know. I guess I don't have a good answer for that.
And for me, I think there's also a feeling that comes with forgiveness. So think about, like, Eric, if you're processing something and, like, in your mind, you're like, okay, like, Jess did something to me and I'm working through this, like, in my own mind, like it's in yourself, like maybe between you and God and you're processing something. If I come up to you and say, Eric, I know you haven't forgiven me, forgive me, the feeling inside you can change. Like it almost feels like or it could be defensive. For me, it's like, I wrestle a lot with, like, forgiveness being an action, but then it's also such a vulnerable, like, internal feeling with how we navigate it. And it can just, it feels like it changes and moves. And I don't know if it's just me. I think it's, as the more I've talked to people, that happens more and more with others, but it's just this, it feels complex and it can change, like, with our interactions with it too, like depending where we're at on that road of forgiveness. And so,
well, and sometimes I think people are quick to forgive, but then when they have to consistently ask for forgiveness for the same thing over and over again, and it becomes a pattern, then you wonder what does that mean for the person on the other side of that? Are they, if it's a relationship thing, should they stay in that relationship? Is that something unhealthy? Is this person forming a pattern that can change? Or, I mean, they've proven that it isn't changing. So, do you accept that forgiveness? I don't know.
Yeah, and I just think there's probably just not, at the end of the day, and I'm sure by the end of this conversation we'll get to, there's not a prescriptive way, because there's not prescriptive damage that can be done to a person. And so every layer and every level of pain caused or, injustice against a person or whatever, our response is probably going to look different. I mean, the amount of pain caused over time by somebody, or, if somebody's murdered someone in your family, I mean, all of these things are unequal. And so to apply an equal, like, this is how it has to look is a difficult thing, because there's not really a prescriptive way. Anytime there's a wrong against you, no matter how bad it is or how much that stacks up, there's not this level of, especially I think in humanity, of how we ought to forgive. Because on a cosmic level, even when we get into scripture a little bit later, there's like perfect holy God and then humans. But when we're sinning against one another as people, there's not that same inequity that's happening there, where I'm perfectly holy, and therefore when Eric does something that's anything to me, that chasm that's between us is just a different kind of stain. And so I think it's important to realize and reconcile that as humans, as all sinful, flawed beings, what that looks like is different than like the cosmic level of forgiveness that's offered through Christ. And yet we'll talk a little later on how he does offer us forgiveness and how our response should be. I think something that points to him.
Well, and then you'll hear people, I think people want to always kind of wrap forgiveness up in this quick little catchy phrase, like forgive and forget, or you can forgive but you don't have to forget, or forgiveness. I think I hear a lot anymore. Forgiveness isn't really for the person you're forgiving; it's more for you. And it's like, in some ways, yes, those things are true, but they also can't be further from the truth at the same time. Because for me to be forgiven by someone is also, in a lot of ways, a form of freedom from what happened to me. Like if I hear a sincere apology about someone that has wronged me, in a lot of ways that sets me free from that. And so it's definitely for the person you're forgiving, I think, just as much. And I think one thing that's important to remember is that doesn't automatically or immediately make the person who is forgiving you, the person who's asking for forgiveness right for what they did. Right. And I think sometimes we look at it as like, oh, okay, well, I hurt you, but I asked for forgiveness, so it's fine.
Right.
And you know what I did wasn't that big a deal, whatever. Or I made it. I don't know. It's tough because everyone is going to fall, or if people aren't sincere about it, they don't believe what they did was actually a bad thing, or why would it hurt? That wouldn't hurt me if someone did that to me. So, you know, I don't really need to give you a sincere apology.
And I think sometimes too, when we think about forgiveness, we also closely tie it with reconciliation, and that's not that's not what forgiveness is. It doesn't mean, okay, I'm forgiving you for what you did now, and the point of it is to get back into relationship, or like let's get along. Like those are two different things, and those are two different almost subjects where we could have a whole nother podcast on reconciliation and what that looks like.
Or I've even seen more and more people say you can forgive someone without telling them, and I think that's kind of an interesting thing. I don't know, is that goes back to, I think, people believing that forgiveness is solely more for the person who's forgiving.
I've forgiven people that don't know.
Yeah,
but I think for me, it's also like those are people that have like traumatized me, as a child. Like there are, I think, times where it's like you have to work through that differently. That's a different kind of forgiveness, to not have a conversation with them. But there is something where it's like, yeah, can I forgive someone that has abused me in the past that I don't want to talk to and I don't want to have a conversation about it, but I know I need to forgive them.
Yeah.
And that's a different way of looking at it. And I think that, like, that's to your point, it's like there's different ways that we can achieve forgiveness and go about it. We can be in conversation. There are times when maybe it's not the safest for us to.
So in that sense, it's more about you being able to move on from that situation that was holding you back. Yeah. That's good.
And I think there's an ability to forgive people for their ignorance, but doesn't mean you demand that they continue to do that, right? And so there's like times where like I've been ignorant and totally, I mean, unpurposefully, and you know, said something or did something to somebody, and I'm like, oh wow, never would have considered that was hurtful or painful to you or people group or whatever it might be. I mean, this happens all the time, especially in stereotypes and so on and so forth. And so people are able to offer me forgiveness and yet still hold me accountable towards like growth inside of that. And so it's okay for them to be like, yeah, I believe you that you were ignorant and silly, and that was an offhanded comment or thing that you did. And yet I'm still going to hold you accountable to not continue to do that. And so, and I think that's a part of the forced kind of mess that we get into. And I think all of us are programmed as kids sometimes to do is like, when there is like, all right, you hit your sister, you hit your brother, like it's so inundated us in us from an early age, say sorry, you know, and that forced like, no, say sorry. And it just does something to you where you can become so, you know, just numb to what sorry even means. Oh, I can pretty much do whatever I want. I can feel no real remorse. And then I can say sorry. And then it's all of a sudden it's supposed to be all is forgiven. And so there's these demands on saying that to your kid, you know, and probably all of us have heard that and been, and probably good, you know, our parents or whoever taught us that and was doing that out of love and trying to help us understand what this means. And then on the flip side, like you guys talked about earlier, it's like, and then you demand them to say, I forgive you, give a hug, make up, kiss and make up, kind of.
Now go play.
Yeah. And it just underplays at such a critical age, working this muscle of how do I forgive? How do I lament? How do I grieve? How do I have feelings? How do I communicate, you know, that I'm not remorseful or I am remorseful? And so it becomes complicated, especially as parents, because I've just found myself in kind of automatically autopiloting into that mode sometimes with my kids and forcing those types of things, forgiveness, which isn't actual real forgiveness.
Well, even the thought that I could do something so hurtful to someone and, you know, they would need to forgive me, but then also, you know, I think there are instances where you have to forgive yourself for what you did too, because we say that a lot in Christianity. You don't need to take a shower to get clean, sort of a thing. You know, if you're, you don't have to get clean before you come to Christ. but there is something to that. I think people feel like I'm not worthy because for one, I don't feel that I've been forgiven by this person, or I have not been able to forgive myself for the things I've done to people. And when we get into scripture, there's a couple different scriptures that I've always kind of just wrestled with because I don't, I maybe need Carl to help me break it down, but where's Carl? Let's get him on the phone. But I don't need to jump too far ahead here in our outline, but maybe Alex can answer these for me. You give me some insight here. But Mark 11:25 says, "And when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may forgive you your sins." Luke 6:37 says, "Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven." And I mean, at face value, you kind of read those and go, "Oh, okay. Wait, so as a Christian, if I am, one of our DNA statements is encounter the Father daily. If I am encountering the Father daily, if I am praying, and I haven't forgiven someone, is he saying that he hasn't forgiven me?" And it's
Feels
like
conditional.
Yeah, it does. And so in some ways, I think people could look at that and go, okay, well, maybe I'm not actually saved because I haven't, gone through the process of forgiving these people. And I don't know, I'd love to hear from your, like, a pastoral perspective, like, how do people process when they read scriptures like that, what that means for them and their journey of forgiveness?
Yeah, and probably the most familiar actually that has that same kind of thought is in the Lord's Prayer. And so in the Lord's Prayer, it's, forgive me of my debts as I forgive those who have trespassed against me. And so, like, part of the idea is and I think one thing that'll be important later is to make a distinction between forgiveness and then reconciliation. You brought that up, Jet. Like, once I forgive somebody, what does the reconciliation or not reconciliation process look like? What is my relationship status with that person? And so, understanding the cosmic level of what I've been forgiven of, forgive me in the same way I forgive others, is this reminder to us, like, man, there's something mysterious about, I think, what Jesus is saying here. But in the same level that I'm demanding of grace, I should be a recipient of grace. And so there's this realization of, as somebody who much is given, much is required. And so the more I'm able to wrestle with the magnitude, and I think that's a part of sanctification, the magnitude of my sin, the more I'm able to actually the more I'm able to realize the capacity of how much I've been forgiven, the more I'm able to grow my capacity to forgive, which I think is a whole entire process. And the more close I get to Jesus, the more my relationship with him, matures and richens. There's this weird paradox that the more I look like Jesus, I should look like Jesus, the more I'm building a relationship with him. But the bigger I realize the gap is between me and Jesus. And so as I've looked more like Jesus, I also am realizing from 10 years ago, I have realized that I look a lot more like Jesus at this point. Yet I have never more greatly understood how wide that gap is between, the holiness of me and God. And so I think that's all a part of that maturation process and what God is continuing to do and reveal in our heart and renew in the gospel inside of who we are. And so continuing, and I think that's partly what the exercise in the Lord's Prayer is to consistently remind us, man, I have been just afforded incredible, crazy, amazing grace. Am I giving that out? And I think that's the importance of the discipline of it, is consistently remembering that. Because if we don't consistently remember that, then I think we will consistently not be good givers of grace and mercy. So I think there's a distinction to also point out between grace and mercy. Mercy is, when you're extended, is not getting something you deserve. So mercy is like, I did something wrong and somebody's extending mercy and I don't get the punishment that I deserve. Grace is, I got something that I didn't deserve. So now I don't just get the punishment, but I'm also given a life that I didn't deserve, or freedom and hope eternal that I didn't deserve. So Christ isn't just giving us mercy and pardoning us. He's also giving us his seat at the table, which is, this beautiful part about the distinctions between grace and mercy as well that I think is somewhat relevant to the conversation.
I think too, when we're, you made me think of this, Eric, just encountering the Father daily, and then Alex, you can maybe add to this, is we have more capacity to forgive when I encounter Jesus in different ways. So I encounter his forgiveness, but I also understand him as a father and a defender and a protector and somebody who weeps with those who weep, and we see in the Bible his compassion for those. And so when I know that Jesus holds space for pain, and when I know that he defends and protects and he is a judge as well, when we understand more parts of who he is, then I, in my own life, have felt more capacity to forgive, because I know that it's Jesus is holding that pain in space with me and giving me capacity to do that. And so I think that's also part of it too, is we really need to know Jesus and all parts of him. And when we feel that pressure of that one scripture too, like you're saying, it's like, okay, what's the context of that? Like just how you kind of broke that down. It's we need to interact with it more, because it can really shame us and put pressure. And then we say, well, I don't want Jesus, I don't want Christianity. But it's like there's a divide that there's understanding that's we just need to move towards. So
yeah, and I think there's people too that I've heard say that they can't forgive somebody. If they feel unable to forgive someone for what they've done. And I guess if we were to listen to the patron saint Taylor Swift, she would say that's okay. But I think there are physical, visible effects and signs when people don't forgive, and when they're unable to forgive. I think there are health consequences, and that's not just that's not hearsay.
No,
it's been medically proven.
I saw an article from Mayo Clinic that said letting go of grudges and bitterness can make way for improved health and peace of mind. Forgiveness can lead to healthier relationships, improved mental health, less anxiety and stress, lower blood pressure, stronger immune system, and a list of other things as well. So it was interesting to see that of, what's the toll that it actually takes on our physical body too, with what we carry.
A couple of weeks ago when Aaron Huber was on, we were talking about kind of that fight or flight and how that happens. And I think when there's someone that you haven't forgiven who has done you wrong, and you encounter that person maybe in a situation where you didn't intend on encountering that person, I think your body kind of goes into that, and you feel that kind of rush of adrenaline, and your face becomes flush, and you're like, I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't know how to interact with this person. But there's been times when I've encountered that, and that person has already moved on, and maybe I haven't, but then they talk to you in a way that disarms you, and you kind of go, okay. But it just feels, I guess what I'm saying that to say, it's such a nuanced thing, because maybe it isn't always spoken, maybe it isn't a spoken forgiveness, and still, that healing can still come about even when it's not directly spoken. But when you look at these physical ailments that come from it, it makes you realize how important it is. I can think of like being in disagreements with people and not sleeping at night, or thinking, oh, what are these people thinking of me, and why, I can't believe they did this, or why would they do that, or why would they act this way? And you realize that there's no health benefits physically or mentally to just like clinging to something and letting it kind of dominate your thoughts all the time.
Yeah, during our Unoffendable series, I know that was kind of one of the things Mark talked about in October was around this idea, because that whole concept of being unoffendable, I know you talked to Brant, was, okay, so what does that mean for forgiveness? Being unoffendable doesn't mean you just let people run all over you, and people can just get away with all their wrongs. And like Jess said, on a cosmic level, do believe in God's sovereignty, and that God will make every right wrong, and he will eventually fix it. But we're still living in this tension of the mess, and you just don't let everybody run over you. We still have to defend those who are vulnerable and things like that. And one of the things that Mark talked about, and I know he's talked about this before a few times, is the 4 R's of forgiveness. And I don't know if they're original to him or not, but there's a blog from October 8th you can go look at too that I think is helpful with a graphic. But
on our website?
Yeah, on ccomaha.org/blog. But the 4 R's are revenge, and he would say never. Like, never is it good to seek revenge. Release. So always, you should always at least release the bitterness and hatred, which it helps you regain the power and control of your life. Reconcile, usually. Strive to make peace with others when possible, as long as it's safe and wise. I think those are 2 caveats to make sure you have there. And then reinstate sometimes. So reinstatement may be appropriate in certain cases, but it's not always advisable. And so I'm curious, like, from your, point of view, Jess, as a therapist and counselor, would those be things in line with somebody that's coming to you and they've got a lot of pain and, whatever? I mean, every situation's unique.
Yeah.
That you would give some of that advice?
Yeah, I feel like I would definitely agree with some of that. For me, it's interesting as we have processed through this. When I first am meeting with somebody, and it's usually about something that someone else has done in our lives, I think as much that's kind of what we're all in some degree would be processing in therapy. When someone's sitting across from me, I'm not like, all right, forgive. Like, that's what we got to do first. It's a process. And so I don't think that that's necessarily like the first thing that I'm asking somebody to do, because I think we have to know ourselves and what we're dealing with. And I think we also have to get to a place where that's something that we want for ourselves. And like we've talked about, like, we grew up hearing people say, hey, you need to go forgive, or you need to go ask for forgiveness. And so it kind of flips the script, and we kind of don't know what to do with it when we're adults. And we're like, okay, well, now what's forgiveness? And so to me, it really morphs into like forgiveness as a process. And so I guess, like, real quick, I just want to say just a couple things that I would do in therapy is I go through a couple things of like, what if we do get to forgiveness, like what it is. And it's letting go of resentment, anger, and hostility. Might be recognizing that the wrongdoer is human. Maybe a chance to amend a relationship that was damaged if you choose to do so. And there's a couple different things that I go through, but forgiveness is not conditioning, approving, or excusing what happened, or forgetting how you were wronged, or pretending like nothing happened. And so I think that there's this balance that we definitely have to go through, but definitely I would say that sounds like a great blog post that I would point people to, for sure.
And forgiveness, obviously, it is a crux of, the faith, Christianity. And before that, there was a story where, these people came up to Jesus and they're like, all right, how many times they're like, the law specifically talked about how many times you're supposed to forgive. And they're like, we're supposed to give 7 times, right? Like, and a lot of times we look for like the rules on this kind of stuff, and we over analyze it, and we want too much prescriptive. And that's what these guys wanted, is like, all right, after 7 times, like, I'm good. That's all I got to do. And Jesus is like raising the bar 7 times 70 and 70 times 7. And he's like, and even in that, Jesus isn't saying, no, I'm trying to give you a math equation, so you're actually keeping track of how many times did I forgive that person? Did I get to 490? But he's just saying, be gracious in your ability to forgive people. And so a lot of times we'll even take scripture and overlay it and then create like tally marks of, okay, well, there it is, 491. I'm done forgiving my wife, or whoever it is. And so I think it's important to note that all of this, there's so many levels to what that means. And so having those definitions of what forgiveness is and forgiveness is not, I think is really helpful, Jess.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any other spiritual perspectives that we haven't pointed out or haven't addressed, or anything that you guys can think of that, I think Jesus talks about this a lot, and he was the ultimate example of it. We're forgiven of our sins because of Christ's death on the cross, which that, even that example is, when you really think about it, it's hard to wrap your mind around someone to forgive you for something that in a lot of ways, they had no connection to you for why you are sinful or what you've done or the sins you've committed, and so it's an ultimate sacrifice. But yeah, what are some of those other?
I mean, forgiveness is scandalous. And I think one of the most scandalous moments I can think of in Jesus' life and teaching on this was at the pinnacle of his death. Like, Jesus is about to die. He's hanging on the cross, and like somehow in him, and I think it's because the Spirit of God is residing him in this moment, and the complexity of him being separated from his Father. And he says to his Father, forgive them. The people that just slaughtered him.
Yeah.
Forgive them, for they know not what they do. And he knows even in this moment. I mean, that's just scandalous. Even in the midst of in their ignorance, he's offering, forgiveness. And so it's just one of those things that I don't think we can do well and fully apart from the Spirit of God working in our lives and giving us the power or empowering enough in us to offer forgiveness. And even when we do, forgiveness is not always accepted, and so you can offer forgiveness as a gift to somebody, but you can't control whether somebody's going to accept that gift or not. And that's what the gospel is. Christ offers all of us forgiveness cosmically for our sins, and we each, I don't get to choose for Jess doesn't get to choose for her kids, we don't get to choose for our spouses. Each of us is given this, and it's a gift, and we have to choose whether we want to accept, that forgiveness or not. And so that can sometimes be the pain point, and some of the most painful things that can cause bitterness. If you really sincerely realize, man, I messed up, I hurt this person, I feel it in the core of my bones, and I'm making an apology, and that person doesn't accept that.
Yeah.
That's even on the flip side, where it can cause you to have bitterness or reinvigorate some of those pain points and those feelings. And so that's complex as well on the other side of forgiveness.
I just want to share a quick story of how this has kind of played out in my life recently. My son, obviously, I said at the beginning of the episode, had surgery a couple weeks ago. And it was the Sunday before that happened where I was feeling a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. And I had never gone to, which we should take more advantage of. I'd recommend it, is to go to the prayer room at church. And so I went into the prayer room with my kids and my husband and myself, and I asked for prayer. And there's amazing people that were in there that just prayed over our family. But one thing that came up was just this spirit of anxiety and fear that I had, that I just think has been around for a long time, just because of my childhood. And it was significant for me to ask for prayer for my kids and to take care of them the way that I do, because I didn't necessarily have that as a kid and somebody that was watching out for me. And so one of the things that one of the people that were praying for me asked was, is there anyone that you haven't forgiven? And so I put myself in that position, obviously, where that could be something that somebody asked me, and instantly someone's name came to mind. And so I was like, yeah, I don't think I've forgiven this person. And they were like, can you forgive them? Can you pray a prayer of forgiveness for them? And I'm like, okay, can I forgive them? And I got literal, like, can I pray for them or pray a prayer of forgiveness? Like, sure, I can do that. But I think that Jesus loves like that open heart for us, where we're kind of wrestling and struggling. So I was like, God, I want to forgive this person. And I named them by name. And I was like, I want to forgive them. Help me to forgive them. Help my heart to heal and to get to a place where I can, wrestle with that and to get closer to where I want to be with that. And that in my mind did not mean reconciliation or being in relationship with them. And so I would say that that's a great place to start if we're struggling with it and somebody comes to mind. And then the next thing they asked me was, Can you pray a prayer of blessing over that person? And you know what I said? And it doesn't have to be pretty. I was like, God, I hope they have a great day today. And I hope that you meet them today, and you meet them in their life, and you become real to them, and that they have a relationship with you. And so to me, that's like, for me, that was a safe way to engage in forgiveness in a really like painful corner of my mind or in my life that came up. But you know what? The days after that, the most peaceful week I've had in years. And especially just like with everything that was going on with my son, like just the peace and seeing Jesus as I like stepped into that. And it's not totally released, and it's not like something I'm working through or like done working through. But I think it's like, you know, can you take that step, and can you trust that Jesus is walking through it with you?
Yeah, well.
So
yeah,
I guess, sorry, I didn't mean to go on a monologue, guys.
Yeah, no,
but
I think that's really...
I just, felt like maybe that's helpful for somebody to hear that. It's like, we don't always have to be in a place of like full release, but it's like, I think Jesus, like, where's your willing heart? Like, where's your open heart? And like trusting him to lead us to the next place.
No, I think
so that's where I'm at.
It's a really
I feel
good,
like this
it's
is
a really
a
good
hard
example,
subject.
I think, because that's the one thing that's been on my mind a lot is like, how do I forgive the person that there's a good chance I'll never see them again, you know? And that's just because of the type of relationship it was or anything like that. Like, how do I forgive that person? And I think that's a great example of a way of moving towards that. So
I think just one other thought that popped in my head, and I'll blame it on God, but is I think sometimes the hardest person to forgive for some people is themselves. And I think sometimes we're better at giving others grace. We're better at realizing that God extends them grace, and there's just people, and probably someone listening to this, that like that's their biggest struggle is that I cannot forgive myself. And just want you, to take that to Jesus, you know, and understand the cosmic level of his forgiveness for you. And maybe that is a reason to reach out and see a therapist, or to have someone pray with you, because sometimes that is our biggest nemesis, the person that, you know, if only people knew this about me, if only, you know, and it holds you back from, you know, being the best parent, to being the best friend, being the best whatever, if you're harboring just bitterness in yourself toward yourself. And so I just think it's important to also realize not just how we externally forgive, but the importance of internal forgiveness in our lives, because I think it's super important for moving in our lives and to find freedom there too.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. I think it's something that people will have to spend some time and process. I know it's something I'm processing through, because I think there's so many layers to it. There's so many different aspects to what it looks like in everybody's life. And I mean, I think there are people who've carried hurt for a number of reasons, and they don't let that go. They're unwilling to forgive people, and it starts to kind of stack up like, you know, luggage in a closet. And it's something that's good for us to process and think about. And I think even as you said earlier, Jess, you start to identify, wow, is this the reason I'm feeling this completely different emotion?
Yeah.
You know, it's because of the unforgiveness that I have for someone or myself. I think, Alex, you mentioned next steps for reaching out to, whether that's counseling. I mean, we have City Care Counseling here. Jess is a part of that. There's renewal groups at cccomaha.org/renewal. There's a lot of different options for you, but I think if you can find help, or maybe, you know, maybe it's just having that conversation that you've been putting off too. But I think that does it for us today. Thanks everybody for listening. Appreciate it. Thanks for taking some time out of your week to join us in these conversations. And hopefully it's beneficial to you. If you have any questions or concerns, you can always reach out to us on social media, on Instagram or TikTok at CCCOMA Podcast, or you can send us an email to podcast@cccomaha.org, or leave us a voicemail at 402-885-9930. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.